Imagine this. You wake inside the walls of Babylon, the heartbeat of the ancient world. The dawn air is thick with incense from temple fires, a perfume laced with the sharper bite of animals in the markets, and the sweat of thousands of bodies stirring to life. All around you, the city hums. Bronze gates creak open to let caravans through. Merchants shout in Akkadian, Aramaic, and Persian. The clatter of chariot wheels rings against stone. And above it all, higher than the eye can truly measure, the ziggurat rises like a stairway to the gods themselves. This is Babylon, the jewel of Mesopotamia. A city of myth, a city of brick and blood, of gardens that never should have grown in desert soil, and of walls so thick that chariots could ride upon them side by side. To its people, Babylon felt eternal. To the world beyond its gates, it was the symbol of wealth, pride, and divine favor. But history has a cruel sense of irony. The higher a city climbs, the farther it has to fall. And Babylon's fall, sudden, silent, almost bloodless, would haunt the memory of civilizations for thousands of years. But before we arrive at that fateful night, we must understand how Babylon rose, why it gleamed so brightly, and why its ruin became the stuff of scripture and legend. Babylon. The name itself is a translation, a reshaping. In Akkadian, the language of its people, it was Babilim, the gate of the gods. That name alone tells you something. This was no ordinary city. To live here was to dwell in the very threshold between earth and heaven, where mortal men climbed towers that seemed to touch the sky. And indeed, in later centuries, Jewish exiles and Greek travelers would remember this place as the inspiration for the Tower of Babel, where humans dared to climb too close to divinity and were punished with scattered tongues. Myth and memory entwine here so tightly it's hard to pull them apart. Was Babylon really the site of that tower? Probably not. But did it feel like it could be? Yes. Because when you stood in its streets, craning your neck upward until it hurt, the city whispered to you that anything was possible, that mankind could rival the gods. And yet, Babylon was also fragile. For all its grandeur, it was made of clay, literally. Mud brick stacked upon mud brick, baked in the harsh Mesopotamian sun. The same sun that nourished the wheat and barley also cracked walls, eroded towers, and reminded every generation that no matter how high they built, time would eventually pull it down. Walk with me through those gates. The famous Ishtar Gate, rebuilt by Nebuchadnezzar II in shimmering blue-glazed brick, adorned with lions, dragons, and bulls, each one a symbol of divine power. Imagine the colors catching the sunlight, cobalt blue against golden sand, roaring beasts frozen mid-stride, their eyes glinting as if alive. To pass beneath that arch was to step into another world, a world where kings boasted they were chosen by the gods and where every street carried echoes of conquest. Inside, Babylon was crowded, noisy, alive. The Euphrates River cut through its center, its waters both blessing and curse. On its banks, barges unloaded cedar from Lebanon, copper from Cyprus, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. The bazaars overflowed with goods, spices that burned the tongue, ivory that gleamed, perfumes that masked the sweat of empire. You could hear 10 languages in a single market stall and see faces from lands far beyond Mesopotamia: Elamites, Persians, Jews, Greeks. Babylon was not just a city. It was the world condensed into brick and dust. But beyond the noise lay something quieter, something more dangerous. Pride. Babylon was more than rich. It was confident, too confident. People whispered that its walls could never fall, that no army could breach them, that the gods themselves had laid their blessing upon its towers. The bigger the boast, the sharper the tragedy when it collapses. If you had asked a Babylonian in its golden age whether their city would last forever, they would have laughed. Not because they doubted it, but because forever was too small a word. Babylon wasn't just enduring. It was eternal, at least in their eyes. Kings carved it in their inscriptions, priests chanted it in their hymns, and scribes pressed it into clay tablets that still survive today. And yet, look closely. Behind the glimmer of tiled walls and the roar of festivals, you'd see cracks forming. The city was built on conquest, on tribute, on the labor of thousands who had little choice. To keep the temples gilded and the gardens watered, someone had to haul the bricks, pay the taxes, endure the lash. Every empire looks eternal from the throne room. It looks much shorter-lived from the mud hut. But let's not rush ahead. For now, stand with me in the streets, and look up. The ziggurat rises above us, the Edamanenki, the foundation of heaven and earth. Some say it stood nearly 300 feet high, layer upon layer of mud brick painted in brilliant colors, crowned with a temple to Marduk, the city's patron god. To climb it was to walk closer to the divine. To fall from it was to be shattered utterly. No wonder later ages turned it into the Tower of Babel. The Hanging Gardens, too, haunt our memory. Were they real? Were they myth? Ancient writers swore they saw terraced gardens, watered by ingenious machines, where palms and vines cascaded over stone walls in the heart of the desert. Some modern scholars think they were a later invention, confused with gardens in Nineveh. But myth or reality, the idea of Babylon as a green paradise in the sand stuck, and it still sticks today. Babylon, the impossible city. And here is where the legend begins to darken. Imagine standing on those walls, looking out over the desert. The heat shimmers. The horizon stretches flat, endless. You feel safe, unassailable. But somewhere out there, unseen, armies are moving. Somewhere, men are plotting. Somewhere, the river that nourishes your fields will become your enemy. Babylon rose in fire and gold, but its end came in silence. No clash of swords, no storming of gates. Instead, a riverbed emptied, a pathway opened, and in a single night the eternal city was swallowed whole. Its walls, which seemed immortal, became irrelevant. Its people woke to find a new king, a new master, and a new truth. Even Babylon could fall. But we are not there yet. The fall is still to come. For now, the story turns to the beginning, to a small settlement on the banks of the Euphrates that grew into the greatest city the world had ever seen. Let us walk backward through time, away from the gardens and the walls, down into the dust of origins. Because before Babylon was legend, it was only a village. And that is where the tale of power and fragility truly begins. The dust of Babylon's streets clings to your sandals, but as you turn a corner and let your gaze wander, something strange begins to happen. The noise of merchants fades, the towering walls shimmer as if melting in the sun, and the ground itself seems to ripple backward in time. Brick by brick, the Ishtar gate dissolves. The blue tiles vanish into raw clay. The towering ziggurat crumbles layer by layer until only a mound of earth remains. The hanging gardens wither back into dry sand. And in their place, something smaller, humbler, but no less alive. Before there was glory, there was mud. Imagine a wide, flat land stretched between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the cradle where so much of civilization stirred awake. The soil here is dark, rich, heavy with silt carried down from mountains hundreds of miles away. When the rivers flood, they leave behind a gift, fertile earth that yields barley, wheat, dates, and sesame. To a wandering herder, tired of following sheep across scrubland, this was paradise. But paradise never comes without its price. The floods are generous, yes, but they are also cruel. They arrive without warning, sweep away houses, drown fields, and leave devastation in their wake. To tame these rivers, people learned to dig. They carved canals into the earth, built dikes and levees, and in doing so they transformed chaos into order. Out of that backbreaking labor grew villages, then towns, then cities. And among these, one would rise above them all: Babylon. At first, it was nothing grand. Just another settlement clinging to the Euphrates, its huts pressed close together, its fields stretching outward in neat squares. Clay houses baked hard in the sun, reeds woven into mats, families living side by side with their goats and donkeys. But something about this spot on the river mattered. Here, the water ran steady. Here, trade routes crossed. Here, the soil was generous. And so, people stayed. Stay long enough in any place, and it begins to gather weight. Memories pile up. A harvest feast one year, a burial mound the next. A shrine raised to a local god, perhaps just a simple altar of mud brick where smoke curls skyward. Each act binds people tighter to the land. The word for this settlement, Babylon, the gate of the gods, was not a boast yet. It was a prayer, an invocation, a hope that the fragile walls of mud and reed might be blessed, might endure. Now imagine walking those first narrow lanes. The air is heavy with the smell of fish drying in the sun, of dung fires smoldering low, of damp earth freshly turned for planting. Children chase each other barefoot, their laughter echoing against walls no taller than your chest. A woman balances a jar of water on her head, its clay surface sweating in the heat. A man kneels by the river, dragging a net heavy with carp to shore. This is not the Babylon of glazed brick and royal decrees. It is Babylon as a heartbeat, small, vulnerable, but pulsing with the energy of survival. The people who lived here did not yet know they were standing on the seed of legend. To them, the world was fragile, ruled by whims of gods as moody as the weather. Every flood was Enlil's anger. Every fertile crop, Marduk's blessing. Every stillborn child, the work of unseen demons creeping through the night. They carved their fears into little clay tablets, scratched prayers into amulets, and wore charms against spirits that whispered sickness into their lungs. To live here was to live with uncertainty, always glancing at the river as if it might smile one day and bite the next. But fear has its uses. Fear drives innovation. And innovation builds power. To protect themselves from flood and famine, the villagers of Babylon learned to work together in ways their wandering ancestors never had. Canals needed many hands. Dikes required coordination. Grain storage demanded trust. Out of mud, water, and necessity, community was born. And community, when it grows strong enough, becomes civilization. As the centuries drifted on, Babylon began to gather threads from the wider world. Caravans arrived from Sumer, bringing stories of Ur and Uruk, cities with temples so vast they seemed like mountains planted by human hands. From the north came traders with tin, from the east stone and gems. Babylon's people, once just farmers and fishermen, became something more, merchants, scribes, priests. They began to press what shaped marks into clay tablets, inventing writing not for poetry, but for survival, tallies of grain, debts owed, promises sealed. Yet once a tool exists, it takes on a life of its own. Numbers gave way to myths, ledgers to hymns. And soon Babylon was not just a cluster of houses by the Euphrates. It was an idea, one that carried forward. Pause for a moment. Close your eyes. Imagine standing where that ziggurat would one day rise, but in these early days, the ground is flat. Before you stretches the Euphrates, its waters brown and restless, catching glints of sun. Behind you, the village smokes faintly with cooking fires. And somewhere in the distance, across the plain, another settlement rises. The air feels thick with possibility. No one here knows it yet, but the age of cities is dawning. Babylon is about to step from obscurity into destiny. And destiny, like the river, always cuts its channel in the end. The gods, the people believed, had chosen this land as their dwelling. Why else would the soil yield so much? Why else would caravans find their way here? Why else would a city emerge where there was once only marsh? When humans crave meaning, they weave it. And so the myth of Babylon's divine favor began, even when it was only mud walls and prayer fires. That belief, that Babylon was not just another town but the threshold of heaven, gave its people the courage to build higher, to dig deeper, to dream larger. But dreams are double-edged. They build temples, yes, but they also invite envy. By the time Babylon grew into a true city, other powers already loomed across Mesopotamia. To the south, Sumer's ancient cities boasted lineages of kings stretching back centuries. To the north, Assyria's shadow grew long. Babylon, in its youth, was vulnerable, sometimes swallowed by its neighbors, sometimes crushed beneath their armies. And yet again and again it rose. Destroyed, rebuilt, burned, reborn. Each time, it came back stronger. Why? Because the land was too rich, the location too vital, for anyone to abandon. Empires rose and fell, but the village on the Euphrates endured, quietly growing into a name that would outlive them all. And so we see the paradox at Babylon's heart: fragility and endurance, mud brick and myth. From the very beginning, it was both doomed and eternal. And perhaps that is why its story still grips us. Because in Babylon we see ourselves, the hunger for permanence, the fear of collapse, the desperate hope that what we build will matter. The streets grow busier in your mind now. Huts become houses. Houses become compounds. The first palace rises, little more than a fortified hall, but in it a king sits, a man who dares to call himself chosen by the gods. Outside, scribes scratch on clay, recording laws and contracts. Priests chant before altars. Farmers bring in sheaves of barley. And the name of Babylon begins to carry weight. From dust, from mud, from fear of rivers, civilization has taken root. And those centuries must pass before Nebuchadnezzar builds his shimmering gates. The heartbeat of Babylon is already strong, pulsing beneath the soil, whispering of glory to come. Step carefully, for we are about to walk into its golden age. The hum of Babylon's early streets grows louder, steadier. The mud walls strengthen, the shrines swell into temples, and the clay tablets multiply in storerooms until they fill whole archives. Kings have risen here before, names carved into stone, each declaring themselves favored of the gods. Yet their reigns, though mighty, flickered out like torches in the wind. Conquest swallowed them. Famine humbled them. Rival cities boasted louder. But now something shifts. The horizon darkens with the dust of marching armies, and a name begins to echo louder than all others. Nebuchadnezzar. Say it aloud, Nebuchadnezzar. It rolls heavy on the tongue, syllables like drumbeats. To his enemies, it was a name to dread. To his people, it was a name to boast of. To history it became inseparable from Babylon's grandeur. He did not inherit a city of mud and prayer fires. By the time Nebuchadnezzar II claimed the throne in 605 BC, Babylon was already powerful, already a jewel of Mesopotamia. But under his hand, it would swell into legend. Where his ancestors had built palaces, he built fortresses. Where they had raised temples, he raised monuments that seemed eternal. And where they had dreamt of greatness, he made it tangible, brick by brick, until the whole world whispered of Babylon. Imagine yourself walking the streets now. Gone is the small village huddled by the river. The lanes widen, lined with houses of sun-baked clay, 2 stories high, their roofs flat so families can sleep outside on hot nights. The air smells not only of fish and barley but of perfumes imported from far lands, of roasting lamb seasoned with sesame, of incense drifting from altars. And above all this rises the Ishtar Gate, reborn under Nebuchadnezzar's command into something the world had never seen. Picture it in the sun, massive, towering, sheathed in glazed bricks of lapis blue, the kind of blue that feels impossibly rich against the desert's pale dust. Striding across its surface are lions, bulls, and dragons, the lion of Ishtar, the bull of Adad, the dragon of Marduk. Their bodies shine in gold and white relief, each one a symbol of divine favor, of protection, of strength. To pass through this gate was not just to enter a city. It was to walk into myth. From the gate stretches the processional way, a grand avenue paved with limestone slabs, wide enough for armies to march, for festivals to dazzle, for the very gods themselves to parade. During New Year rituals, colossal statues of deities were carried down this road, their golden eyes glinting as thousands cheered. The sound must have been deafening: drums, flutes, the voices of priests chanting, the roar of citizens pressed shoulder to shoulder, watching their gods stride the earth. And who commanded this spectacle? Nebuchadnezzar, the King of Kings, the restorer of Babylon. He was more than a builder. He was a conqueror. His armies swept across the Near East, toppling foes, dragging captives back to Babylon. From Judah, he carried off treasures of Solomon's temple and thousands of exiles who would forever remember Babylon as the place of their sorrow. Their scriptures would record his name with both awe and bitterness, shaping his image for millennia. But for Babylon itself, these conquests brought wealth, slaves, and prestige. The city swelled with the spoils of war, its temples gilded, its palaces draped in cedar and bronze. Walk through the palace grounds with me. The walls stretch vast, painted and tiled, their thickness so great that chariots can thunder along the tops. Inside, courtyards bloom with date palms. Floors are covered with reed mats and woolen carpets. Servants move quietly, carrying trays of figs, honey, and wine. The throne hall itself is immense, its walls glittering with colored tiles, its pillars carved with images of winged bulls and celestial beasts. And at the center, Nebuchadnezzar sits, robed in embroidered linen, a golden crown heavy upon his brow. His voice, when he speaks, carries like a hammer striking stone. But his ambition did not end at palaces. Babylon's temples, too, rose higher than ever before. The ziggurat of Marduk, the Edamananke, was restored and expanded until it towered like a mountain. Some said it reached 300 feet into the sky. Climb it in your mind, layer upon layer of mud brick, each tier painted in colors, stairways winding upward, the air growing thinner as you ascend. At the summit, a shrine glittered, a place where gods might descend to taste the offerings of men. From below, the ziggurat seemed to pierce the heavens. From above, the city stretched endlessly, walls, gardens, canals glinting like veins of silver in the sun. No wonder later ages remembered it as the Tower of Babel, mankind's audacity turned into stone. And then, the gardens. Ah, the hanging gardens. Even now, their truth is debated. Did they truly exist? Were they here, in Babylon, or in Nineveh far to the north? The scholars argue, but the legends linger. Terraces rising like a green mountain, watered by ingenious machines, where palms, cedars, and flowering vines cascaded over stone. Imagine the sight, a miracle of engineering, where water lifted from the Euphrates nourished trees that should never have grown in desert heat. Some said Nebuchadnezzar built them for his queen, Amytis of Media, to remind her of her mountain homeland. If so, they were not just gardens. They were love turned into architecture, longing made eternal. Whether myth or memory, the hanging gardens became one of the 7 wonders of the world, and their ghost still haunts every vision of Babylon. But the marvels of stone and plant were only part of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. His Babylon was a city of minds as well as monuments. Astronomers studied the stars from its rooftops, charting the movements of planets, weaving them into omens and calendars. Priests interpreted dreams, claiming the gods whispered through visions of lions, serpents, and fire. Scribes pressed endless lines into clay, recording not just debts and contracts, but hymns, prayers, and epics. Knowledge gathered here, stored in tablet libraries that rivaled the legends of Nineveh's halls. In Babylon, the universe felt close, the heavens mapped above, the gods invoked in rituals below, the earth itself bent into canals and gardens by human will. And yet, for all its brilliance, Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon carried shadows. Grandeur demands labor, and labor demands bodies. Slaves worked in the heat, dragging bricks, hauling stone. Captives wept for their lost homes even as they built the wonders that would immortalize their captor. The wealth of Babylon rested on the backs of the conquered, and beneath the city's splendor, resentment simmered. Still, within Babylon's walls, the people rejoiced. Festivals filled the year, Akitu, the New Year's feast, when Marduk was paraded through the streets, his statue gleaming with gold, harvest rites where music thundered late into the night, weddings blessed by priests under the watchful eyes of lions carved in stone. Life here was rich, layered with ritual, soaked in pride. For a citizen of Babylon in Nebuchadnezzar's time, the city must have felt unstoppable, indestructible, favored by every god in heaven. Stand again on the walls. Feel the sun on your face, the dry wind sweeping from the desert. Look out across the plain. Rival armies lurk beyond the horizon, yes, but who could breach these defenses? The walls rise so thick that chariots can race atop them. Towers bristle with archers. The river itself winds through the heart of the city, carrying grain and wealth from lands upriver. Babylon seems eternal. It feels eternal. Nebuchadnezzar has made it so. And yet, time has a way of mocking pride. Every brick will one day crumble. Every garden will wither. Every king will fall. The people of Babylon do not know it yet, but their boast of eternity will be their undoing. For now, though, the city blazes at its zenith, glittering with wealth, crowned with gardens, fortified with walls that seem invincible. Nebuchadnezzar reigns, and Babylon shines brighter than the stars its astronomers chart at night. But already, the seeds of weakness stir. Luxury saps discipline. Wealth breeds envy. Conquests bring captives who do not forget their chains. Beyond the walls, other empires are rising. And history, relentless as the Euphrates, moves ever forward. Listen closely, for the noise of festivals will one day be drowned by the silence of conquest. The Golden Age is here, but its shadow is already forming. The drums of Nebuchadnezzar's parade still echo faintly in your ears, but now the sound mingles with another kind of music, the clink of scales weighing silver, the murmur of merchants bargaining in half a dozen tongues, the rattle of caravan bells at the city gates. For all its fortresses and temples, Babylon was not only a kingdom of kings and priests. It was a crossroads. A place where the wealth of half the known world spilled together like tributaries pouring into a great river. The Euphrates was the city's lifeblood, but trade was its pulse. Step with me into the bazaar, the great market of Babylon, and let your senses drown. The sun is high, hot enough to sting the skin, but beneath awnings of dyed cloth the air is shaded and heavy with scents. Cardamom and cinnamon prickle your nose, perfumes shipped from Arabia, measured out grain by grain because each is dearer than gold. Baskets of dates glisten like jewels, their skins sticky with sugar. Piles of sesame seeds crunch underfoot where merchants have spilled them in the rush of selling. From India come ivory combs and beads of carnelian glowing red as blood. From Phoenicia, glass vessels shimmer with impossible colors, deep purple, sea green, cobalt blue. Egyptian traders display papyrus scrolls and amulets shaped like the eye of Horus. And nearer at hand, craftsmen of Babylon lay out their own wares, clay tablets pressed with contracts, bronze tools, wool dyed in indigo. The babble of voices is constant, Akkadian mingling with Aramaic, Aramaic mingling with Egyptian, Egyptian clashing with Hebrew. Babylon is no longer one city. It is the world concentrated, condensed into a single thunderous marketplace. But trade is not only goods. It is knowledge, too, and Babylon feasts on it. Here, a Greek sailor gestures at the stars, boasting of how he guided his ship across foreign seas. There, a Jewish exile quietly copies his people's stories onto clay tablets, preserving them for generations that will remember this place as both prison and forge. Priests lean close over astrological charts, sharing calculations with visitors from Persia. Ideas, like spices, flow in every direction, carried on the same currents of trade that bring ivory and glass. The wealth that fills Babylon is visible not only in its markets, but in the way its very streets gleam. Imagine walking along the processional way at the height of festival season. The pavement beneath your feet is stone, polished by thousands of sandals. The walls that flank you are tiled in blue and gold, lions marching endlessly along them, each one roaring silently in defiance. You look up and see balconies draped with embroidered cloth, women leaning out to watch the parades, their wrists jingling with gold bangles. Above them flutter banners dyed in colors so rich they seem to burn against the desert sky. The city itself is wealth incarnate. Its walls consume brick by the million. Its palaces sprawl like miniature kingdoms within the greater one. Even its gods glitter, the statues of Marduk and Ishtar clothed in robes of fine fabric, crowned with gold, their altars thick with offerings of food, wine, and incense. It is said that Nebuchadnezzar's temples devoured more treasure than most kings could dream of. And in return, the priests promised that the gods themselves favored Babylon, that wealth was not mere fortune but destiny. Destiny, though, has many faces. The people of Babylon lived it differently depending on where they stood in the hierarchy of fortune. For a noble, wealth meant feasts in great halls, music from harps and drums, dancers whirling until the torchlight blurred. It meant hunting lions beyond the city walls, a display of power immortalized in carved reliefs where kings struck beasts down with arrow and spear. It meant owning not only houses but people, slaves brought from foreign wars, their labor hidden behind the silken curtains of palaces. For the merchant, wealth was risk and reward. One caravan could make a man rich, another could vanish in desert sands, swallowed by raiders or storms. They slept with scales beside their beds, dreaming of weights tipping in their favor, waking to count coins by lamplight before the morning's bargaining began. For the farmer, wealth was measured in measures of barley and sesame oil, the yield of fields coaxed from the earth by sweat and prayer. They paid their dues in grain and hoped the river would be kind. Wealth touched them less directly, but even they felt it, in the demand for surplus, in the scribes who recorded every bushel, in the soldiers who demanded food for the king's wars. And for the captives, the exiles of Judah, the chained prisoners of conquest, wealth was a cruel mirage. They saw it everywhere, the blue-tiled walls they helped build, the palaces their sweat mortared, the banquets where they served in silence. Babylon's wealth was their labor, but its glitter belonged to others. Perhaps that is why, in the Psalms of the Jewish exiles, Babylon appears not only as a city of rivers but of sorrow, a place of mourning even amidst gardens and gold. Yet wealth has a way of dazzling even those who resent it. Picture an exile walking the processional way during the Akita festival. He cannot leave the city, he is bound here, his home far away. But he sees with unwilling awe the golden statue of Marduk carried high, the crowds roaring, the musicians pounding rhythms into the earth. He smells roasted meat, honey cakes, wine spilled upon the stones. He feels the weight of Babylon's power, its impossible abundance, and though his heart aches, he cannot deny that this city has become the axis of the world. Babylon did not hoard its wealth only in markets and temples. It spread it outward through spectacle. The city itself was a stage, its architecture a performance of dominance. The walls, stretching so wide that Herodotus claimed chariots could ride abreast upon them, were not merely defenses. They were declarations. They said, "Look upon us and despair, for nothing can breach what we have built." The ziggurat said, "We are closer to heaven than any other people." The hanging gardens said, "Even nature bends to our will." Every stone, every carved relief, every tile of glazed blue shouted Babylon's supremacy to the world. And beyond the walls, traders carried that message further still. They returned to their homelands speaking of a city where the gates gleamed like the sky, where palaces devoured whole forests of cedar, where rivers were tamed into channels of silver. To outsiders, Babylon was more than a city. It was a myth already forming. A place half real, half legend, whose name would live on the tongues of strangers who had never seen it. Wealth breeds memory. Memory breeds myth. And myth, in time, becomes as powerful as stone. But wealth also breeds danger. For every coin in Babylon's coffers, there was a hungry eye outside its walls. For every caravan that arrived laden with treasure, there was a rival king who wanted it for himself. The more Babylon shone, the more it drew envy. And envy, in the ancient world, marched with armies. Yet within the city, such threats felt far away. Inside its walls, life was a daily carnival of abundance. The river gleamed, the bazaars roared, the palaces glittered. Babylon at its height was not a place that imagined doom. It was a place that imagined eternity. Stand with me once more on its walls, as the sun sets. The horizon burns red, the river mirrors fire. In the markets, lamps are being lit, their oil flames flickering gold across stalls. Music rises from courtyards, laughter echoes in the narrow lanes. A breeze stirs from the desert, carrying the mingled scents of spice, smoke, and wine. To live here now, in the height of Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, was to live in the center of the world, surrounded by wealth so dazzling it seemed it must never end. And yet, the higher the tower, the longer the shadow it casts. For all its glitter, Babylon was not untouchable. Beyond the horizon, new powers stirred. The Persians, patient and watchful, were growing strong. The same trade routes that filled Babylon's coffers carried whispers of Cyrus, the king whose ambitions stretched wider than even Nebuchadnezzar's had dared. But within the walls, few thought of such shadows. Tonight, the city blazes with light, its wealth on full display. Tomorrow, too, it will blaze. And the day after. For now, Babylon is certain of its eternity. And certainty, as history shows, is the most dangerous illusion of all. The noise of the bazaar fades behind us as we walk farther through the city. The perfumes of cinnamon and sesame, the cries of traders, the laughter spilling out of courtyards, all dim, replaced by another sound entirely. It is not music, nor voices, but a presence, a hush that settles whenever one approaches Babylon's most imposing feature: the walls. At first, you notice them only as the backdrop of the city, their vast lines pressing against the horizon. But as you draw closer, their immensity begins to weigh on you. They rise not as buildings do, with doors and windows, but as cliffs, sheer plains of baked brick and stone that stretch skyward until your neck aches from staring. The sun blazes against them, and the surface seems to glow, a living barrier of earth transformed into something greater. These were no ordinary walls. In a world of mud brick towns and timber stockades, Babylon's fortifications seemed impossible. Herodotus, the Greek historian writing centuries later, claimed the city's walls were 300 feet high and wide enough that chariots could race along their tops side by side. He may have exaggerated, travelers always do, but even if the true height was half that, the impression they gave was overwhelming. To an approaching army, they were not walls. They were the horizon itself. Walk with me along their base. The bricks are stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's own inscriptions, each bearing his name, as if to remind the very earth who commanded it. Some still read, "I am Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. I made this wall to be strong as the mountains, everlasting as the heavens." Every block becomes both stone and boast, a message to the gods and to any enemy foolish enough to approach. But the walls were not merely height and thickness. They were layers. Babylon was said to have not one line of fortifications, but several, each concentric, each a new barrier to be overcome. Between them ran moats filled with river water, canals diverted to serve defense as much as irrigation. Imagine an enemy standing outside, staring at wall after wall, each one seeming to mock their efforts. The city was a fortress multiplied, its defenses not singular but endless. And yet, for those inside, the walls were more than protection. They were pride. Children grew up playing in their shadow, tracing the stamped bricks with tiny fingers. Merchants walked beneath their gates and felt safe to trade their goods. Priests blessed the stones during festivals, declaring them the bones of the city, the skeleton that held Babylon upright. For the citizens, the walls were not simply defenses. They were identity, proof that Babylon was unlike any other place on earth. Stand upon the ramparts now, as a guard might on a hot afternoon. The stones beneath your feet radiate warmth, the baked heat of a Mesopotamian sun that spares nothing. Look outward. The desert stretches endlessly, shimmering with mirages, empty save for the faint scars of caravan tracks. From up here, the world seems small, insignificant, while Babylon feels eternal. You can almost believe what the scribes inscribed, that these walls would last forever, unmoved by time or war. The gates, too, were wonders in themselves. The Ishtar Gate, with its lapis blue bricks and gleaming beasts, was only one among many. Each entrance to the city was monumental, designed to awe both those who entered and those who defended it. Bronze fittings caught the sun. Towers flanked the openings, ready with archers. At night, torches burned in sconces, their light casting long shadows across the moat below. Passing through such a gate was not casual. It was ritual. It reminded you of the power you were entering. To the rulers of Babylon, these walls were more than stone. They were symbols of cosmic order. In Mesopotamian belief, chaos always threatened to devour the world, in the form of floods, invaders, demons. To build walls was to hold chaos back, to carve a pocket of safety where life and civilization could thrive. Every brick laid was an act of defiance against the void. And the greater the wall, the greater the victory over disorder. Babylon's fortifications were thus not merely military structures. They were theology in stone, the city itself declaring its triumph over chaos. And yet, theology has its shadows. The same walls that gave comfort to the citizens could breed arrogance in their rulers. If no enemy could breach them, then Babylon was untouchable. If Babylon was untouchable, then it was eternal. And if it was eternal, then nothing needed to change, nothing needed to adapt. Pride seeps slowly, brick by brick, into the heart of a city until it becomes as much a part of the walls as the clay itself. Consider the daily life of a watchman stationed high upon the towers. He looks outward across the desert, day after day, year after year. Few armies dare approach. Caravans come, yes. Messengers arrive. But enemies? Rare. Each uneventful day adds to his certainty that none will ever come, that the walls are so fearsome they destroy threats before they even appear. And in that certainty lies the first seed of complacency. Inside the city, wealth continued to flow. The bazaars bustled, the temples gleamed, the gardens blossomed. Few thought of enemies. Why should they? Had not the walls kept them safe for generations? Had not even the greatest conquerors faltered before Babylon's gates? To question the city's invulnerability was to question the gods themselves, and who dared do that? Still, rumors seeped in with the caravans. Whispers of a new power rising in the east, of Persian kings who commanded not just one people but many, who welded nations together into something greater than any city. Cyrus, they said, was a name to be feared. But within Babylon's walls, such talk felt distant, almost laughable. What were Persians to lions and dragons carved in stone? What were foreign kings to the walls of Nebuchadnezzar? The irony is sharp. The very walls that made Babylon proud also made it blind. For in the end, it was not siege engines or ladders that undid them, but arrogance, the belief that walls alone could preserve a city forever. But that is still to come. For now, we remain in their shadow, admiring their sheer audacity. Picture night falling over Babylon. The torches along the ramparts flare, flames whipping in the desert wind. The towers stand dark against the starlit sky, immense silhouettes that dwarf the houses below. From the river, the walls seem to rise straight out of the water, their reflections shimmering, turning the city into an island of light. To an approaching traveler, the sight would be both terrifying and magnificent. To stand outside those gates was to feel small, unworthy. To pass through them was to enter the very heart of the world. The people of Babylon slept sound beneath their weight. They believed the walls would keep them safe. They believed the walls would outlast time. They believed the walls themselves were eternal. And belief, for a while, can be stronger than stone. Yet belief falters when tested. And stone, no matter how vast, eventually crumbles. For tonight, though, the walls still hold. The city still glitters within. And the pride that pulses through Babylon's veins beats stronger than ever, blind to the dangers gathering beyond the horizon. The torches burn on Babylon's ramparts, their flames shivering against the night wind. From the streets below comes laughter, music, the thrum of life in a city that believes itself immortal. But if you listen closely, beneath the revelry, you can hear a quieter sound, the groan of strain, the whisper of weakness winding its way through the mortar. Empires rarely fall with a crash. More often they decay, brick by brick, unnoticed until the first wall buckles. After Nebuchadnezzar, the city still glittered. His monuments stood, his inscriptions proclaimed Babylon's greatness. But monuments cannot rule. Kings die. And when they do, their heirs inherit not only their palaces but their burdens. Nebuchadnezzar's successors struggled beneath the weight of his legacy. How does one live up to a reign that rebuilt the city, humbled nations, and dazzled the world? Few could. Imagine walking through the palace after Nebuchadnezzar's death. The halls still gleam with tiled beasts, the throne still looms beneath its carved canopy. But the new king who sits there does not command the same awe. His voice lacks the thunder. His gaze lacks the fire. He may wear the crown, but behind the curtains factions whisper. Priests argue over omens. Nobles jostle for influence. And always the question gnaws, who truly rules Babylon now? The priests of Marduk claimed authority through ritual. They reminded the people that the gods' favor was what kept the river flowing, the fields fertile, the walls unbroken. Without proper sacrifice, without daily rites, chaos might return. But their grip on power grew as much from politics as piety. If a king displeased them, they could simply delay the rituals, refuse to confirm his rule, murmur to the people that the gods were not pleased. A king without divine sanction was no king at all. Meanwhile, the nobles had their own ambitions. Wealth breeds envy, and Babylon was drowning in wealth. Merchant families who had grown rich on trade sought greater voice in court. Generals who commanded armies began to believe their swords deserved more weight than prayers. And so the palace, once the heart of unity, became a nest of rivalries. Each faction pulled in a different direction, each one gnawed at the city's cohesion. And outside the palace? The city swelled beyond its strength. Wealth attracts mouths, and Babylon was crowded now with people from every corner of the empire. Not all were citizens. Many were captives, exiles, slaves. Their labor kept the palaces shining and the markets overflowing, but their loyalty was thin. For every golden statue of Marduk paraded down the processional way, there was a pair of eyes in the crowd that looked not with awe, but with hatred. A city can be rich in silver and poor in unity. Even the common people felt the strain. Luxury at the top often means burden at the bottom. Taxes grew heavier, demanded in grain, in labor, in silver. Farmers bent over their fields felt the lash of officials demanding quotas. Merchants counted coins only to see them seized by scribes for the temple. A city that had once been the pride of its people began to feel like a weight pressing on their shoulders. And then there was the danger of plenty itself. Babylon, so accustomed to abundance, forgot hunger. Its feasts grew longer, its revels wilder. Nobles lounged in perfumed halls, drinking wine from golden cups, feasting on lamb and fish while musicians played and dancers twirled. The poor looked on, their bellies empty, their hearts souring. What had been pride began to smell like arrogance. Pride, too, seeped into the city's defenses. Guards leaned lazily on their spears, certain that no enemy could breach walls so vast. Generals paraded through the streets, but their troops grew soft, accustomed more to ceremony than to battle. The citizens themselves no longer feared invasion, they scoffed at it. When caravans brought whispers of Persian armies rising in the east, the people laughed. "Let them come," they said. Our walls will swallow them whole. But cracks in stone do not appear overnight. They creep slowly, widening with each season. And so it was with Babylon. A king murdered here, another dethroned there. Civil wars simmered like fever under the city's skin. At times, foreign rulers seized the throne, only to be cast out again. Each cycle of upheaval weakened Babylon's unity, even if the city's glitter hid the rot. Imagine a night in the city during this decline. The streets still blaze with torches, music still pours from courtyards, the temples still smoke with offerings. But if you slip into the alleys, you hear another Babylon. A woman haggling desperately for bread. A soldier grumbling that his pay is late. A slave whispering of escape. The city is still magnificent, yes, but beneath the gold lies restlessness. Some sensed it even then. Prophets among the exiles spoke of Babylon's doom, calling it a city of sin destined to fall. To them, the glittering walls were not symbols of strength but of arrogance, and arrogance always calls down ruin. Their voices were small compared to the roar of Babylon's festivals, but they were not wrong. The Euphrates, too, offered a warning. The same river that fed the city also threatened it. Its floods had been tamed by canals, its waters guided through gates. But rivers are restless. Silt-choked channels, dikes cracked, and each repair required labor, silver, and attention. Resources that kings distracted by palace intrigues did not always provide. The lifeblood of the city was also a slow danger, pressing constantly against the walls that confined it. In this way, weakness seeped into Babylon as quietly as water through a crack in stone. It did not yet roar. The city still glittered, still roared in its festivals, still believed itself eternal. But the seeds were sown. Luxury dulled discipline. Rivalries split unity. Pride blinded eyes. And beyond the horizon, Persia was watching, waiting. Picture again the walls, blazing with torchlight, the towers gleaming against the stars. They still look invincible. They still silence fear. But listen closely. Beneath the roar of celebration, the city is groaning. Its strength is no longer what it was. Its guardians no longer watch as keenly. Its people no longer believe effort is needed when eternity has already been promised. That is the danger of glory. It convinces you that it will never end. And so Babylon, the city of wonders, the gate of the gods, began to drift unknowingly toward its night of reckoning. The walls of Babylon still glitter in torchlight, but beyond them, across deserts and mountains, something vast is stirring. The city sleeps in its luxury, confident in its invincibility, while in the east another destiny awakens. Empires rarely fall only from within. They fall because another power grows hungrier, stronger, more disciplined. And in the 6th century BC, that power was Persia. Imagine the land first. Not the fertile floodplains of Mesopotamia, but a harsher world, high plateaus stretching under a relentless sun, mountains jagged as broken teeth, valleys where rivers carve sudden life through endless stone. To survive here requires resilience. The Persians had it in abundance. Shepherds and farmers, horsemen and hunters, they lived in a land where nothing came easily, and in that difficulty, they forged strength. Their world was not a city of blue-tiled gates and hanging gardens, but tents pitched against the wind, villages clinging to the slopes of mountains, fortresses carved into rock. Theirs was not the wealth of caravans pouring through markets, but the wealth of horses, of iron, of discipline. And above all, they had a gift Babylon had lost: hunger. For centuries, the Persians had lived in the shadow of larger empires, the Medes, the Assyrians, the Babylonians themselves. They were considered a subject people, a collection of tribes scattered across rugged lands. But subject peoples remember. They watch. They learn. And when the moment comes, they rise. That moment came with Cyrus. He was born around 600 BC, heir to a small kingdom in Anshan, a province under Median control. Nothing at his birth suggested that he would one day be called the Great, that his name would echo through millennia. But perhaps greatness often begins that way, quietly, in obscurity, waiting for the right spark. The stories told of his rise are wrapped in legend. Herodotus tells us that his birth was foretold, that a dream warned the Median king of a child destined to overthrow him. To prevent this, the king ordered the infant killed. But the servant tasked with the deed spared him, raising Cyrus in secret. When his true lineage was revealed, he rallied men to his cause and toppled the very throne that had sought his death. Myth embellishes history, but in the Persian mind, Cyrus was marked from the beginning, chosen by fate, spared by destiny. What we know for certain is that by the mid-6th century BC, Cyrus had overthrown the Medes, uniting their kingdom with Persia. This was no small feat. The Medes were powerful, their armies seasoned, their territory vast. But Cyrus combined cunning with audacity. He did not simply fight battles, he won loyalty. He bound tribes together, offered conquered peoples respect rather than ruin, and in doing so, transformed Persia from a collection of clans into a single, rising power. Picture him now, not in a throne room like Nebuchadnezzar, surrounded by glazed tiles and carved lions, but on horseback, his cloak whipping in the wind. His eyes are fixed not on feasts or festivals, but on horizons. Around him ride warriors fierce and loyal, armed with bows, spears, and the unyielding discipline of those who have endured harsh lands. Where Babylon's armies grew soft behind their walls, Persia's hardened itself in constant struggle. Every campaign honed them sharper. Every victory fed their hunger. Cyrus was no ordinary conqueror. Where others destroyed, he often spared. Where others enslaved, he freed. When he swept into Lydia, he did not annihilate the kingdom but absorbed it, respecting its traditions, harnessing its wealth. When he conquered cities, he allowed their gods to remain honored, their temples to stand. It was a policy not of terror, but of tolerance. And it worked. Peoples who might have resisted instead submitted, grateful for a ruler who did not strip them of their identity. In this way, Cyrus built something new, not merely an empire of land, but an empire of loyalty. The Persians began to see themselves as destined. Their religion, Zoroastrianism, divided the world into light and darkness, order and chaos. Cyrus, to his people, embodied light and order, the chosen instrument of Ahura Mazda, the supreme god. Each victory was more than a conquest. It was proof of divine favor. Each city that fell to Persia was another brick in a cosmic mission. And as Persia grew, its shadow stretched westward. Lydia fell. Media fell. The edges of Anatolia bent to Persian rule. By the 540s BC, Cyrus commanded an empire unlike any the region had seen, vast, diverse, unified under a vision that was more than mere conquest. But one jewel still lay unconquered. One city still gleamed, proud and certain of its eternity. Babylon. Imagine the whispers that reached its markets. Traders spoke of Persian horsemen moving like storms across the plains, of Cyrus treating even the conquered with dignity, of whole nations bending the knee rather than resisting. In taverns and at caravanserais, men murmured that Persia was no ordinary kingdom, that it was something larger, something inevitable. And yet, within Babylon's walls, these whispers carried little weight. The people scoffed. Had not their city defied Assyria? Had not their walls withstood every enemy? Babylon was eternal. Persia was distant. Its rise was impressive, yes, but no force could breach the walls of Marduk's city. The priests continued their rituals, secure in the gods' favor. The nobles feasted in their courtyards, unconcerned. The guards leaned on their spears, confident in their towers. Only a few, perhaps, sensed the tremor beneath the ground, the faint shifting of history. Step now with me into the desert, away from Babylon's complacency, into the Persian camp. The fires burn low, sparks drifting into the night. Warriors sit sharpening blades, their faces lit by flickering light. Horses stamp the earth, restless. And at the center of it all, Cyrus sits, silent, his gaze fixed westward. He does not see only Babylon's walls. He sees its pride, its divisions, its weaknesses. He sees not just stone, but arrogance. And arrogance, he knows, is the softest clay. The Persians are patient. They do not need to batter themselves against walls like waves against cliffs. They need only to wait for the right moment, to find the cracks. Empires crumble not from a single blow, but from pressure applied where they are already weakest. And Babylon, for all its glory, is weaker than it knows. The rise of Persia was not a sudden storm, but a steady tide. It gathered strength quietly, inexorably, until even the strongest walls could not withstand it. Babylon still danced in its festivals, still paraded its gods, still believed in its eternity. But across the horizon, Cyrus was coming. And when he came, the rivers themselves would bow to him. The night wind drifts cool across the Persian plateau, stirring the banners of an army that never seems to rest. Fires burn in 1,000 camps, their smoke trailing into the dark like offerings to heaven. Men sit in small circles, sharpening blades, oiling bows, whispering in tongues from every corner of Cyrus's growing empire. Lydians with their heavy shields, Medes in their tall caps, Persians with their recurved bows, horsemen who ride as if born in the saddle. It is a patchwork of nations, yet it beats with a single heart, the will of Cyrus the Great. The advance does not roar like a sudden storm. It moves like a season, steady, inevitable, reshaping everything it touches. City after city falls not only to battle, but to policy, to persuasion, to the simple recognition that resistance against such a tide is folly. Cyrus has mastered something Babylon no longer understands, that empires are not held only by chains, but by choice. Many prefer his rule, with its respect for their gods and customs, to the arrogance of Babylonian overlords. And so as the Persians move westward, the earth itself seems to bend before them. Imagine the dust. A line of march stretching for miles, men and beasts moving in rhythm, carts creaking beneath the weight of supplies. Horses snort, their breath fogging the morning air. Shields clatter. The ground trembles beneath countless feet. This is no raid, no temporary foray. This is a migration of power, an empire on the move. Word of this advance travels faster than the army itself. Messengers ride ahead, their horses lathered, spreading both fear and opportunity. Cities in Mesopotamia begin to murmur. Some debate resistance, others wonder if opening their gates might spare them destruction. And always, in the background, looms the question, what of Babylon? Inside its walls, the mood is divided. Nobles scoff, still convinced of their invulnerability. Priests insist the gods will protect them. But in the taverns, among merchants who hear the whispers of caravan routes, doubt grows. They speak in low voices. The Persians took Sardis. They crossed the Zagros. They are closer now than ever. Farmers grumble about the burden of taxes, soldiers about pay delayed. An empire begins to tremble long before its walls are breached. Meanwhile, Cyrus's strategy unfolds with brilliance. He does not hurl his forces blindly at Babylon's walls, as others might. He encircles the lands around, cutting arteries that feed the city. He moves along the Euphrates, probing its defenses, studying the lifeblood of Babylon as carefully as a surgeon examines a patient. For Cyrus knows a truth that few within the city can imagine: walls can be overcome not only by force, but by water. The Persian king is more than a warrior. He is a thinker. His advisors include engineers who study the flow of rivers, generals who calculate supplies with precision, diplomats who know the weight of words as well as swords. Each conquest is not just a victory of battle, but of planning, of understanding the psychology of the enemy. He knows Babylon's strength lies in its pride, and pride, if nudged, topples more easily than stone. Picture the Persian army now encamped within sight of Babylon's outer lands. The city glimmers in the distance, its walls rising like mountains, its towers catching the sun. To most men, such a sight would chill the blood. But among the Persians, there is no panic. They trust their king. They have seen impossible cities fall before. And Cyrus himself, gazing upon those walls, does not frown. He studies them, silently, as if reading a text written in stone, waiting for the line that will reveal its weakness. Inside Babylon, life continues with a strange defiance. The markets still bustle, the temples still smoke with incense, the palaces still echo with feasts. Yet an unease creeps at the edges. Families wonder if they should stockpile grain. Merchants glance nervously at the horizon. Farmers whisper of Persian patrols roaming the countryside, demanding oaths of loyalty. The city still believes itself eternal, but eternity begins to feel fragile. And so the Persian advance presses closer, not with wild fury but with measured inevitability. Each move is deliberate. Each step brings the horizon nearer. Cyrus does not need to storm Babylon's gates immediately. He only needs to wait. For time, like water, wears down even the hardest stone. The Euphrates flows steady, its brown waters glinting under the sun. To the Babylonians, it is their lifeline, the artery that feeds fields, fills cisterns, nourishes the gardens said to touch the heavens. To Cyrus, it is something else entirely. It is a key, a pathway, a weakness disguised as strength. And as the Persians move closer, their eyes linger not only on the walls but on the river that runs beneath them. Imagine the unease of a Babylonian watchman on the ramparts. He leans against his spear, staring at the desert where dust clouds rise in the distance. He has heard of Persia's conquests, though he scoffs aloud with his fellows. Yet, in the silence of night, staring at those faint smudges on the horizon, he wonders. Could the walls truly be breached? Could the city fall? He pushes the thought away, but the seed has been planted. The Persian advance is not just an army moving. It is doubt spreading. It is fear seeping. It is the slow realization that no wall, however thick, is truly eternal. And Cyrus waits. He knows that arrogance is as useful an ally as any soldier. The longer Babylon believes itself invincible, the less it prepares. The less it prepares, the easier it will fall. So the Persians press onward, steady, unstoppable, the desert swallowing the sound of their march. The horizon darkens with their banners. The earth trembles with their advance. And Babylon, still radiant in its pride, is about to learn the most painful truth of all, that the mightiest walls can crumble in a single night. The horizon darkens with Persian banners, yet inside Babylon's walls another sound rises, not the clatter of shields or the hurried tramp of soldiers, but the thrum of drums, the laughter of crowds, the chants of priests leading processions. The city is not preparing for war. It is preparing for a festival. Babylon was never only stone and mortar. It was rhythm, ritual, and spectacle, a city that turned religion and wealth into performance. And even as danger gathered outside its gates, life inside clung to the old rhythms. To break them would be to admit fear, and Babylon was not afraid. Or at least, it pretended not to be. Imagine the streets at dawn. The sun creeps over the walls, gilding the towers in fire. Already the air smells of roasting lamb and baking bread, the smoke of offerings curling skyward from temple courtyards. Drummers pound slow rhythms that carry across the city, echoing against stone. Priests in embroidered robes lead chanting choirs, their voices rising in Akkadian, in Sumerian, in the old sacred tongues. And from every alley and rooftop, citizens lean out, eager to see the processions. This is no ordinary day. This is festival. Perhaps it is a key to the great New Year's feast, when the statue of Marduk himself is carried from his temple, or perhaps one of the seasonal rites when gods walked once more among their people. Whatever the occasion, the city gives itself over entirely. Business halts. Market stalls overflow not with trade but with free offerings, figs dipped in honey, beer ladled from clay jars, fish grilled over open fires. The processional way, that great limestone avenue, fills with life. Its walls, studded with roaring lions, seem almost to move as torchlight flickers across their glazed bodies. Children climb onto their fathers' shoulders to see better. Women drape themselves in bright shawls, their hair oiled and scented with perfume. Merchants close their shops to join the crowd, their laughter mixing with the drumbeats. And then comes the heart of it, the procession of the gods. Priests emerge from the Asagila, the great temple of Marduk, bearing statues draped in gold and embroidered cloth. The god himself, Marduk the king of the heavens, is carried aloft, his image gleaming as though alive. Behind him come the other deities, Nabu, Ishtar, Shamash. Each is greeted with cheers, with prayers, with hands lifted toward the sky. To the people, these are not lifeless idols but the gods themselves walking among them, their presence proof that Babylon is blessed, invincible, eternal. Music follows them, flutes and lyres, drums beating like thunder. Dancers whirl in painted masks, their movements echoing myths older than memory, the slaying of chaos, the triumph of order, the eternal return of spring. Wine flows freely, its sharp scent mingling with the sweetness of incense and the heavy perfume of sweating crowds. If you walk through the throng, you feel the press of bodies, the heat of celebration. A man hands you a cup of beer, urging you to drink in honor of Marduk. A woman tosses flowers into the procession, their petals trampled underfoot. Children run ahead, chasing after the dancers, laughing as if the city's joy is theirs to command. For a moment, Babylon forgets the Persians. Or perhaps it chooses to forget. What enemy could matter when the gods themselves are here? When the city's streets roar with celebration? When wine and music drown out fear? The very act of feasting becomes defiance. To live without worry, to laugh in the face of danger, is itself a kind of victory. Yet beneath the laughter, doubt lingers. In the quieter corners of the city, whispers run. A merchant confides to his neighbor that he has heard of Persian engineers near the river. A soldier mutters that the gates should be more closely guarded. A slave, carrying trays of food for his master's banquet, wonders if the Persians might mean freedom. The festival drowns these voices, but they are there, threading through the roar like cracks in stone. Step into one of the banquet halls and see the nobles at feast. Tables groan under the weight of food, lamb glazed with dates, baskets of figs, loaves of bread still steaming, fish fresh from the river. Golden cups overflow with wine. Musicians play from the corner, their notes weaving through the smoke of torches. The nobles laugh loudly, louder than they need to, as if to banish unease with noise. Some boast that they will ride out against Cyrus and scatter his army. Others wave the thought away entirely. The walls will hold, they say, as they always have. Their voices are proud, but their eyes betray something else, a flicker of uncertainty, quickly drowned in another gulp of wine. Outside, the festival swells. Fires are lit in the courtyards, their smoke rising in fragrant clouds. Dogs bark at the din, their voices swallowed by the music. From the ziggurat, its massive stairways towering above the city, priests light lamps that gleam like stars. To anyone watching from the walls, Babylon must look like a jewel blazing against the desert night, unassailable, alive, untouchable. And yet, beyond the horizon, the Persian camp also glows with firelight. Their drums do not beat for festival but for war. Their chants are not prayers of joy but of preparation. Two worlds blaze at once, one feasting, one advancing. The irony is sharp enough to taste. Inside, the people lift cups to their gods, certain of their favor. Outside, the Persians sharpen blades, certain of victory. The city dances on, its pride louder than its fear. But pride cannot silence the tread of armies forever. Still, for this night, Babylon belongs to joy. The streets are alive with music, the processional way roars with cheering, the air is thick with the smells of roasting meat, wine, and incense. The gods gleam above the crowd, carried on golden litters, their eyes fixed unblinking on the horizon. The people believe, as they always have, that Babylon is eternal. And belief, even fragile, can feel as strong as stone. But belief will be tested. For even as the city celebrates, the river flows steady through its heart. And the river, though worshipped as life, has already become the weapon of its undoing. The torches flare high above Babylon's streets, their smoke curling into the star-soaked sky. But while the people dance and the priests chant, the river moves on without pause. The Euphrates has no interest in festivals. It does not care for pride or prayer. It flows as it always has, carrying silt and secrets from the mountains far to the north, winding like a serpent through the desert, feeding fields, filling cisterns, lapping against the walls of the greatest city in the world. To understand Babylon, you must understand this river. Without the Euphrates, there is no city. Its waters gave life to the barley and dates that fed the people, filled the canals that laced through the city like veins, floated the barges that carried cedar, copper, and lapis from far-flung lands. The river was both lifeblood and highway. It was the spine upon which Babylon stood. Imagine it at dawn, as the first light breaks over the city. Mist rises from its surface, glowing faintly in the sun. Fishermen push out small reed boats, their nets dragging ripples across the current. On the banks, women kneel to fill jars, their reflections shimmering in the water. Merchants guide barges heavy with grain down into the heart of the city, shouting to one another as they navigate the slow bends. And everywhere, the sound of the river murmurs, a steady rush, a whisper that has outlasted kings and will outlast them still. The Euphrates was not just useful, it was sacred. To the Babylonians, its flow was the gift of the gods, a divine artery running through their world. They honored it with offerings, poured wine and oil into its current, prayed that its floods would bless rather than curse. When the waters rose too high and devoured fields, it was a punishment, a sign of divine displeasure. When they nourished crops, it was a blessing. To live in Babylon was to live in a constant relationship with this river, half gratitude, half fear. From the river's banks, the city rose in layers, docks bustling with traders, houses pressed tight together, courtyards where children splashed water over each other in play, palaces whose walls gleamed in the sun. Canals cut through neighborhoods, branching like arteries, their surfaces crowded with small boats, ferrying goods and people. Even the hanging gardens, if they were real, depended on it, their terraces green only because water was lifted, bucket by bucket, wheel by wheel, from the Euphrates below. The river was everywhere, woven into every part of life. But here is the paradox: what gives life can also undo it. The river that sustained Babylon was also its most dangerous vulnerability. It flowed straight through the city, beneath its mighty walls, passing under gates that opened directly onto the water. These gates were fitted with bronze and iron, meant to be secure. But water is patient. It slides past bars and stones, never tiring, always searching for cracks. And where water flows, men can follow, if only they are clever enough. The Persians understood this. As they camped outside the city, their engineers studied the river with hungry eyes. To batter down Babylon's walls was folly. To climb them was impossible. But the river was a door waiting to be unlocked. Yet inside Babylon, the people paid little attention. To them, the Euphrates was familiar, ordinary, dependable. They had known it since childhood, seen it every morning, heard its voice every night. How could such a friend ever betray them? They poured wine into its waters during the festival, confident that the river was theirs, that it belonged to Marduk's chosen city. They never imagined it could be turned against them. Picture a guard standing watch near one of the river gates during the height of the celebrations. The music from the processional way drifts faintly across the water, drums echoing, voices singing praises to the gods. The guard leans on his spear, listening more to the festival than to the current at his feet. Behind him, the city roars with joy. Before him, the river flows silently into the dark. If he peers long enough into the water, Perhaps he sees stars trembling on its surface. What he does not see is that the same current carries the possibility of invasion, that somewhere upstream men are already planning to bend it to their will. For centuries, Babylon had relied on the Euphrates as its shield as well as its lifeline. The river's course was controlled by canals, dikes, and gates. Its flow was regulated, its floods tamed. The Babylonians believed they had mastered it, that water itself bowed to their engineering. But water, unlike walls, cannot be commanded forever. It slips through fingers. It erodes stone. It waits. And Cyrus, watching from his camp, understood what the Babylonians had forgotten, that the greatest strength of a city can also be its undoing. Think of the irony. Inside, the priests sing hymns to the river as divine, offering thanks for its bounty. Outside, Persian engineers dig trenches, plotting to draw its waters away. Inside, children splash in its shallows, cooling themselves in the heat. Outside, men study the current's depth, imagining soldiers wading its bed. Inside, nobles boast that the Euphrates guarantees their safety. Outside, Cyrus smiles, knowing the river will be his ally. The Euphrates flows on, oblivious. It has carried silt and fish and men's hopes for millennia. It will carry them long after Babylon is dust. It does not care whose city it feeds or whose walls it undermines. It only flows steady, patient, eternal. And one night soon, that patience will be turned into a weapon. The Persians will divert its waters, lower its level, and march where no army has marched before, beneath the walls, through the riverbed, into the heart of the eternal city. But Babylon does not know this yet. For now, its people still drink from its banks, still draw water for their fields, still sing praises to the gods who gave it. For now, the river is still their lifeline. Yet as the festival roars above, the Euphrates glides quietly below, carrying in its current the fate of Babylon. The river glides beneath Babylon's walls, a silver band in the torchlight, indifferent to the laughter echoing above. But out beyond the city, beneath a canvas of stars, another fire burns, not of festival, but of war. The Persian camp sprawls across the plain, its torches flaring against the night wind, its watchfires glowing like a constellation fallen to earth. And at the center of it, Cyrus waits. He has studied the city long enough. He has walked its perimeter with his eyes, noted the thickness of its walls, the towers bristling with archers, the iron gates that shine in the sun. He has listened to scouts who whisper of Babylon's festivals, of complacent guards, of nobles drunk on their own eternity. And above all, he has watched the river. Always the river. To batter the walls would be suicide. To scale them would be madness. But Cyrus does not need to. He knows the truth every strategist learns. The strongest fortress often hides the simplest flaw. For Babylon, that flaw is the Euphrates. Picture the Persian king standing near the riverbank, the moonlight silver on his armor. Around him, his generals gather, cloaks drawn tight against the night. Maps lie unrolled before them, ink marks tracing the current of the Euphrates, its bends and branches, its gates beneath the city. Cyrus's hand rests on the parchment, his fingers sliding along the line of water. "Here," he says softly. "This is how we enter." The plan is as daring as it is patient. Divert the river. Lower its level until men can march through the bed. Slip soldiers beneath the gates that open onto water. Strike while the city feasts and the guards grow lax. It is not force that will win Babylon, but cunning, timing, and silence. And so the Persians begin their work. By day, laborers dig canals, great trenches gouged into the earth upstream. Soldiers wield spades as readily as swords, sweat pouring down their backs in the heat. The clang of picks and the scrape of shovels echo across the plain. Horses haul soil in baskets, men shout orders, water splashes where channels are cut. Slowly, steadily, the Euphrates begins to bend to human will. Its waters, once flowing straight into Babylon, now spill into the diversion canals, draining into marshes where reeds will drink them. Imagine the sight from the walls of Babylon. A watchman peers outward, sees dust clouds, hears faint hammering. He frowns, but shrugs. "Let them dig," he mutters. "What can they do against us?" He does not see the river level lowering inch by inch. He does not understand that each shovelful of soil is a stone pulled from Babylon's foundation. Pride blinds him, as it blinds the city entire. Inside, the people still feast. The festival roars on. Priests parade idols through the streets, nobles drink wine until their voices slur, musicians play until their fingers ache. Children chase each other beneath banners, their laughter ringing above the din. The gods are here, they say. The walls are strong. The river is eternal. But the river is no longer eternal. It is shrinking, trickling, slipping away beneath their very feet. Night after night, the Persians labor. The moon watches, silent, as trenches deepen, as water bends away from its course. Frogs croak in the new marshes, reeds rustle in currents that never flowed here before. And slowly, the great Euphrates dwindles inside Babylon's walls, its bed revealing mud and stone where once water gleamed. Cyrus waits until the moment is perfect. Too soon, and the river will still be deep, drowning his soldiers. Too late, and Babylon may sense the danger. Timing is everything. And Cyrus, patient as the river itself, knows how to wait. At last, the hour comes. The river's level has dropped. The gates that once opened onto rushing water now gape above a trickling stream. The mud glistens in the moonlight, shallow enough for men to wade. The city inside still feasts, unaware. It is time. Picture the silence as the Persians move. Soldiers step barefoot into the riverbed, their armor muffled, their weapons bound in cloth to keep them from clattering. The mud sucks at their feet, cool and slick, pulling at them as if reluctant to let them pass. The walls rise dark above, but the guards upon them are few, their attention drifting toward the festival sounds within. One by one, the Persians slip beneath the gates. The iron bars, once washed by the current, now hang exposed, easy to force aside. Men squeeze through, their shadows melting into the city's underbelly. From there, the streets spread before them, empty save for the glow of torches and the echo of distant music. Cyrus has not won yet, but the river has already betrayed Babylon. The stratagem is a masterpiece of patience and precision, remembered for centuries as proof of his genius. Later historians will marvel that a city so proud, so fortified, could fall not to siege engines or fire, but to water tamed by human hands. The river that gave Babylon life became its downfall, and the king who bent it earned his place among the greatest conquerors of all time. And yet, for all its brilliance, the plan succeeded only because Babylon itself was blind. Had the gates been guarded, had the people been watchful, had the nobles not drowned their unease in wine and festival, the Persians might have been caught in the mud, slaughtered before they set foot inside. But pride makes poor sentries. And pride is the one enemy no city can defend against. So the soldiers creep through the riverbed, silent as shadows, while above them the city still roars with joy. And at the center of the Persian camp, Cyrus waits, listening not to music, but to silence, the silence that soon will fall over Babylon, when its people awaken to find that their eternal city has been taken in a single night. The music still drifts through Babylon's streets. Drums beat in the courtyards, lyres sing in banquet halls, and the processional way gleams with torches as priests raise their hands in blessing. Wine pours like water, laughter booms loud enough to shake the tiled lions on the walls. The city believes it is alive with divine favor, its people certain that Marduk himself walks with them. But outside, the river has been turned. And inside, the city is not ready. Imagine a watchman at one of the river gates. His torch flickers low, the flame bending in the night breeze. The water below is strange, lower than usual, sluggish where it once rushed, but he does not notice. He is tired, his ears dulled by the constant echo of music drifting from the city center. He leans against his spear, blinks slowly, perhaps even lets his head droop for a moment. Who would dare strike Babylon during a festival? Who could ever breach walls like these? His faith in the city's eternity is stronger than his vigilance. In another quarter of the city, nobles recline on couches, their robes stained with wine, their eyes glazed. Slaves refill their cups, servants bring platters of figs and roasted lamb. A musician plucks at strings in the corner, his song drowned by the roar of voices debating who has the finer horse, who drank more at last year's feast. They speak of Persia, but only to mock. "Let Cyrus dig his ditches," one says with a slurred grin. "The river belongs to us. Marduk has given it to Babylon. No hand of man can change that." His companions laugh, raising their golden cups in noisy agreement. The temples blaze with offerings. Smoke pours upward, thick with cedar and incense. Priests chant ancient hymns, their voices rising in waves that mingle with the music of the streets. They are confident the gods are listening, that Babylon is safe beneath their gaze. None pause to wonder if the gods are silent, or if their silence is warning. And through all this, the Persians move unseen. Soldiers wade the riverbed, their feet sinking into mud, their armor damp and heavy. They pass under the walls, through gates left unbarred, into alleys that echo only faintly with festival noise. Babylon is sleeping, even as it celebrates. Picture those narrow alleys now. Shadows stretch long across clay walls. Doors are shut, windows dark. The only sounds are distant, the thrum of drums, the bark of a dog, the low hum of revelers singing in drunken chorus. Into this quiet slip figures with drawn blades, their steps careful, their movements practiced. They melt into the city as if they had always been there, shadows among shadows. What if a guard had noticed? What if anyone, had looked too closely at the river? But arrogance is a heavier blindfold than any cloth. The Babylonians trusted their walls, their gods, their pride. And so the Persians walk unchallenged. In the palace, the king sits enthroned amidst the festival, surrounded by courtiers who flatter and feast. The news of Persian camps is dismissed. The reports of digging near the river are ignored. What ruler wants to sour his people's joy with warnings of danger? Better to let the music drown out fear. Better to let wine erase the memory of threats. After all, has not Babylon always endured? The irony is bitter. For centuries, Babylon's enemies had looked upon its walls and despaired. Now, when danger finally comes, it is not with the roar of siege engines or the thunder of battering rams. It comes with silence, with shadows, with water lowered just enough for men to walk where no one expects them. And Babylon, wrapped in the warmth of its own pride, does not hear. Imagine waking in a house near the river. The night is warm, the air heavy with the scent of torches and smoke. You stir, hear faint noises outside, soft splashes, the creak of leather, a muffled clank. You think nothing of it. Perhaps fishermen returning late. Perhaps a caravan unloading quietly at the docks. You turn back to your mat, drowsy from wine, and sleep again. Outside your door, Persians slip past. The city is unprepared not only because it has grown soft, but because it has chosen blindness. To guard too carefully would be to admit weakness. To prepare too much would be to acknowledge fear. And Babylon, the eternal city, does not admit such things. So its gates are left unbarred, its watchmen drowsy, its nobles drunk, its priests busy with chants while shadows pass unseen beneath their feet. The irony deepens. Even now, Babylon believes itself untouchable. The walls are thick. The gates are iron. The river is theirs. Yet those very certainties are the cracks through which ruin seeps. The walls do not matter when the gates are left unbarred. The iron bars are useless when no one watches them. The river is no defense when it has been drained away. Pride has undone what armies never could. and so the Persians spread through the city. They move with discipline, avoiding the roaring festival crowds, slipping instead into the quieter streets, the undefended corners. Their numbers grow as more emerge from the riverbed, until the city that believed itself eternal now holds within its heart the seeds of its own fall. Still, the music plays. Still, the torches blaze. Still, the priests chant. Babylon does not yet know. But soon it will. For a city can feast, it can laugh, it can pretend eternity. But when the dawn comes, and the Persians are standing in its streets, no song, no prayer, no boast will undo what has already been done. The night deepens over Babylon. Above the walls, the stars shine cold, indifferent. Inside, the city blazes with light and noise, its courtyards echoing with drums and flutes, its palaces drowning in wine and laughter. From the processional way comes the chant of priests still carrying statues through the torchlit streets, while in hidden alleys the shadows stretch long and dark. And through those shadows, unseen by the revelers, the Persians move. Their sandals press softly into dust, their blades catch no light. They spread like water through cracks in stone, fanning out from the river's drained bed. No alarm is raised. No trumpet sounds. The guards who should be watching sleep slumped against walls, or lean drowsy on spears, their ears dulled by the music of the feast. A city that believes itself eternal does not expect to be caught in its dreams. Imagine standing at a street corner, feeling the pulse of the festival around you, laughter, shouting, torches blazing, when suddenly a shape brushes past, silent, purposeful. You turn, half drunk, half dreaming, and see nothing but shadow. You laugh nervously, shake your head, tell yourself it was only the wine. Behind you, the shadow slips deeper into the city, joined by others. Cyrus's plan unfolds with perfect precision. The river has been diverted, the gates left unbarred, the people lulled by festival and arrogance. Where other kings hurled armies against walls and left their men broken in heaps, Cyrus has walked into the heart of Babylon without striking a blow. The very city that prided itself on invulnerability has opened its veins to him. The Persians spread like ink across parchment. Some move toward the palace, others toward the temple district, still others toward the gates to secure them from within. Their orders are strict: take the city swiftly, bloodlessly if possible. Cyrus does not want ruin. He wants Babylon intact, a jewel to crown his empire. And so the night is eerily quiet. No screams. No thunder of battle. Only the muffled shuffle of boots, the creak of leather, the faint rasp of blades drawn from scabbards. Inside the palace, nobles still feast. Servants hurry with platters, musicians pluck strings, dancers spin. The king reclines, his cup raised, his words slurred. To him, the city outside is secure, the gods are watching, the walls eternal. But already, Persian soldiers are slipping through the outer courtyards, their shadows stretching across the tiled lions and bulls. The guards at the gates are drunk, distracted, their spears leaning against walls as they join in the feast. None notice until it is too late. The temple courtyards glow with firelight, the air heavy with incense. Priests lift their voices in hymns, praising Marduk, thanking him for Babylon's glory. They do not hear the quiet approach of soldiers moving among the outer alleys, securing the sacred precincts. No idols are toppled, no sanctuaries burned. Cyrus does not seek to anger the gods of Babylon. He seeks to claim them as his own. The priests chant on, unaware that their city has already slipped from their hands. Even in the houses of common folk, the night passes without alarm. Families sleep on rooftops under the warm air, children curled against their mothers, fathers snoring from too much beer. The sounds of the festival carry faintly to their ears. None wake to the footfalls in the alleys below. By dawn, they will open their eyes to a city changed forever, without ever having heard the moment of its conquest. Picture the riverbed, once a gleaming artery through the city, now a muddy path trodden by soldiers. The water still trickles, swirling faintly around their ankles, but not enough to slow them. They move in columns, disciplined, their armor dark, their voices low. Above them rise the walls, proud and useless. The defenses that once seemed eternal now stand as silent monuments to arrogance, powerless against the river's betrayal. The fall of Babylon is not a roar but a whisper. When dawn begins to pale the sky, the truth is already sealed. Persian soldiers stand at the palace gates, others at the city gates, still more at the ziggurat and the temples. This city is theirs. The nobles who mocked Cyrus the night before now stumble into courtyards to find foreign warriors standing in silence, their faces unreadable, their weapons ready. Panic flickers at last, but it is too late. There is no battle to fight. The battle never came. Some say the king himself was killed that night, others say he was captured alive. The records differ, as they often do when empires fall. What remains constant in every telling is this: Babylon, the eternal city, the gate of the gods, fell without resistance. It fell not to fire or ruin, but to silence, to cunning, to arrogance undone. Imagine waking as the sun rises, stepping into the street, expecting to hear drums and laughter from the festival still echoing. Instead, you see soldiers you do not recognize, their banners foreign, their language strange. The walls are unchanged. The houses are the same. The city looks as it always has, but it belongs to someone else. The world has shifted while you slept. This is the great paradox of Babylon's fall. A city that boasted of eternity, a city whose walls seemed unbreakable, did not crumble with a crash. It simply changed hands in the quiet of a single night. One evening the people danced, the next morning they awoke conquered. The walls still stood, the gardens still bloomed, the ziggurat still rose toward heaven, but the heart of Babylon beat to a new master's will. The Persians had done what none believed possible. They had taken Babylon without a battle. And in doing so, they left a wound not in the city's stones, but in its pride. The stories of that night would spread like wildfire. Some would say the gods themselves abandoned Babylon, leaving its people blind. Others would claim Cyrus was chosen by heaven, his victory a divine judgment. Still others, in bitterness, would call it proof that no city, however mighty, can claim eternity. But within Babylon, the truth was simpler. Pride had made them unprepared. Arrogance had left the gates unguarded. And so the city that once mocked its enemies awoke one morning to find itself a prisoner of silence. The sun rises pale over Babylon, casting a soft glow upon the walls that once seemed eternal. They stand unchanged, their bricks stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's proud inscriptions, their towers catching the first light of day. Yet the city they guard is no longer Babylon's own. In the night, its power shifted. The festival songs are quiet now, the drums stilled, the streets hushed in a daze. People peer from doorways, uncertain, as the first day of conquest begins. There is no smoke, no fire, no ruins littered with corpses. The city has not been burned, its temples not toppled, its markets not looted. Instead, the conquerors stand calm in the streets. Persians with their tall felt caps, Medes in long tunics, soldiers from distant provinces who march under Cyrus's banners. They are silent, disciplined, their presence undeniable but not cruel. It is a conquest that feels surreal. Babylon, undefeated in battle, is now occupied without the scars of war. Imagine stepping from your house into the morning air. The smell of last night's torches still lingers, mingled with the faint sweetness of trampled flowers from the festival. You expect to see familiar faces, neighbors greeting the day, merchants opening stalls. Instead, a line of foreign soldiers marches past, their sandals striking the stones in steady rhythm. They do not jeer or shout. They do not seize or strike. They simply move, as though they belong here now, and in their silence you sense a power greater than shouting ever could be. At the heart of the city, the palace is no longer the seat of Babylonian kings. Persian guards stand at its gates, their spears gleaming. Within, courtiers shuffle nervously, waiting to see how the new master will treat them. Some whisper of slaughter, others of enslavement. But Cyrus does not come as a destroyer. He comes as a ruler who understands that conquest is not only about taking, it is about keeping. And to keep Babylon, he must win not only its stones, but its people. The proclamation comes swiftly. Cyrus announces that he has been chosen by Marduk himself to rule Babylon. To some, the claim feels blasphemous. To others, it feels oddly comforting. If the conqueror is blessed by their own god, perhaps life will continue as before. The priests, their power tied to ritual and favor, bend quickly to this new reality. In their chants, Marduk's name is now linked to Cyrus's. The divine has shifted allegiance, and with it, so must the people. And so Babylon begins to adjust. The markets reopen, though cautiously at first. Merchants eye the new soldiers, uncertain whether trade is permitted. Soon enough, the Persians prove themselves eager customers, paying with silver stamped in strange designs. Fishermen still drag nets from the Euphrates. Farmers still bring barley into the gates. The ordinary pulse of life resumes, but with a new undercurrent. Babylon has not been destroyed, it has been absorbed. Cyrus, unlike so many conquerors before him, does not plunder the temples. He does not strip gold from idols or burn the ziggurat. Instead, he orders the restoration of shrines, the continuation of rituals. He even decrees that exiled peoples taken by Babylon may return to their homelands, their gods carried back with them. For the Jews, captive in Babylon for decades, this decree will become legendary. To them, Cyrus is remembered not as a conqueror but as a liberator, the instrument through which their exile ends. This policy is not born only of kindness. It is strategy. By honoring local gods, Cyrus wins the loyalty of conquered peoples. By restoring rituals, he weaves himself into the sacred fabric of their lives. Babylon is no longer Babylonian, but it does not feel desecrated. Instead, it is repurposed, a jewel now set in a different crown. Imagine the processional way, once filled with Marduk's statue carried on golden litters. Now it sees another kind of procession, Cyrus himself entering the city. He does not arrive as Nebuchadnezzar once did, in a blaze of banners and roaring chariots, but calmly, steadily, like a man stepping into what is already his. Crowds line the avenue, their faces tense, uncertain. Some cheer, eager to please. Others remain silent, eyes narrowed, unwilling to celebrate the loss of their freedom. But Cyrus does not demand ecstasy. He demands acceptance, and acceptance is easier when it comes without blood. The palace servants bow, the priests chant blessings, the nobles bend their heads. A new ruler sits where Babylon's kings once drank their wine. The throne does not change, but the man upon it does. The city's identity, so long tied to its own pride, shifts overnight. But what of the people? For them, the change is less immediate, less dramatic. A baker still kneads his dough at dawn. A mother still braids her daughter's hair on a rooftop. A farmer still curses the sun as he drives his donkey to market. Life, in its small rhythms, continues. Yet beneath it lies unease. They know their city is no longer theirs. They know the walls that promised eternity proved useless. They know their gods now serve another king. And though the Persians do not burn or kill, the silence of conquest is heavy, pressing down on every breath. Some accept it quickly, grateful that their homes are intact, their families safe. Others stew in bitterness, whispering in corners about betrayal, about pride lost. Among the exiles, the Jews, the captives from distant lands, there is joy, for Cyrus's decree means hope, return, restoration. For them, Babylon's fall is not tragedy but miracle. And so the city's streets fill with a strange mixture of emotions, relief, sorrow, resentment, hope. All swirl together, as complex as the city itself. At night, the city is quieter now. The torches still burn along the walls, but the music of festivals has faded. Instead, there is the sound of foreign patrols marching the streets, their orders spoken in accents unfamiliar. The Euphrates flows as it always has, indifferent, carrying reflections of towers and starlight. But to those who gaze upon it, the river looks different now, no longer the proud lifeblood of an eternal city, but the path by which their conquerors arrived. Cyrus establishes his rule with efficiency. He places governors to oversee the city, ensures taxes flow into Persian coffers, installs garrisons to maintain order. Yet he does not erase Babylon's culture. He does not forbid its language, its rituals, its identity. Instead, he absorbs them. Babylon becomes a part of Persia, its glory now woven into a larger empire. Its people are not erased, but they are no longer the center of the world. They are a province, a jewel, but no longer the crown. For the first time in centuries, Babylon is no longer Babylonian. And perhaps that is the deepest wound of all. To lose a battle, to see walls crumble, to suffer fire and ruin, these are terrible. But to wake one morning and find your city intact, your temples unburned, your markets open, and yet to know you are conquered, that is stranger still. It is conquest without catastrophe, victory without violence. And in its quietness lies a humiliation sharper than destruction. The Persians now walk Babylon's streets as if they were their own. The citizens bow, serve, adapt. Pride fades, replaced by survival. The eternal city has become merely another gem in an empire that stretches wider every day. And though the walls still stand, they no longer inspire awe. They are reminders now, reminders that no stone, however thick, no tower, however high, can outlast the tide of history. Babylon is alive, yes, but it is no longer free. Babylon no longer belongs to itself. Its palaces echo with the voices of foreign governors, its gates are watched by Persian soldiers, its taxes flow eastward into the coffers of a vast empire. And yet, strangely, Babylon does not die here. A city can be conquered, its pride broken, its rule ended, but its name, its image, its legend can survive long after armies march away. Babylon would not vanish into silence. It would echo, growing louder the farther it drifted from reality, until it became less a place and more an idea. Think first of the exiles. The Jews, long captive within Babylon's walls, now walked free, carrying home with them the bitter taste of the city that had held them. For them, Babylon became more than geography. It became a symbol of oppression, of exile, of longing for home. Their psalms spoke of sitting by its rivers, weeping, refusing to sing their sacred songs in a foreign land. Their prophets thundered of its doom, of a city so proud it was destined for ruin. And even after Cyrus set them free, the name lingered in their scriptures as the emblem of arrogance punished. Babylon became a metaphor for everything that opposes God, everything that rises too high only to be cast down. Centuries later, when Christian writers sought to describe corruption and pride, they too reached for the word. In the book of Revelation, Babylon reappears, not as the Mesopotamian city of bricks and gates, but as a whore of Babylon, a vision of decadence and sin, doomed to destruction. The image was so powerful it outlived the city itself. Even as its ruins crumbled back into dust, Babylon remained alive in the imagination as the eternal example of hubris and divine judgment. But Babylon's legacy is not only dark. For the Greeks who visited, it was a marvel. Herodotus wrote of its immense walls, its wide streets, its bustling markets. Strabo and others repeated tales of its gardens, hanging like green mountains in the desert. For them, Babylon was a wonder of the world, a place where engineering and ambition reached heights almost beyond comprehension. The ziggurat at Etemenanke, the Tower of Babel and later tradition, loomed in their stories as proof of mankind's drive to touch the heavens. The hanging gardens, whether they stood in Babylon or elsewhere, became immortal in the list of the seven wonders. Imagine a Greek traveler walking its streets in the days after conquest. He sees Persians in the garrisons, yes, But he also sees the grandeur still standing, the processional way, the tiled lions, the towering ziggurat. He returns home not speaking of a fallen city, but of a place that dazzled his eyes and stretched his imagination. His words join others, until Babylon's image in the Greek world grows into something larger than reality, a city of marvels, of impossible gardens, of walls so vast they could not be measured. Even later, for the Romans, Babylon retained its weight. They saw it not as a living rival, by then it was long past its glory, but as a symbol of empire itself. To Roman poets, Babylon meant grandeur, decadence, exotic wealth. It was a shorthand for excess, for the richness and danger of the East. Its name slipped into language as a symbol, detached from the bricks and stones that still lingered along the Euphrates. And in this way, Babylon achieved what no fortress, no wall, no empire ever truly could. It became eternal in memory, even as it crumbled in reality. Walk among its ruins centuries later, and you feel this paradox. The bricks lie scattered, the inscriptions half erased, the ziggurat a mound of rubble. The Euphrates still flows, indifferent as ever. The wind carries only the cries of herons and the rustle of reeds where once music roared and chariots thundered. And yet, even in silence, the place hums with story. Every broken brick seems to whisper of lions and dragons, of gardens hanging in the air, of kings who boasted they had built eternity with their own hands. Babylon's legacy also shaped language itself. The Tower of Babel, born of this city's memory, gave the world the very word Babel, confusion of tongues, scattering of speech. The story, whether myth or echo of the ziggurat, became a parable of human pride, of the danger of reaching too high. To this day, when we speak of confusion, of noise without meaning, we say a Babel, an echo of Babylon. And what of the city's image in later ages? For medieval writers, it became the archetype of vice. For painters, it became a canvas for warning, towers rising too high, collapsing under divine wrath. For poets, it was both temptation and caution, a place of gold and ruin, of gardens and downfall. Each age remade Babylon in its own image, each age kept it alive in imagination. Even now, its name stirs something. When we hear Babylon, we do not think only of mud brick ruins on a riverbank. We think of grandeur, decadence, pride, downfall. We think of gardens impossibly green, of walls impossibly high. We think of exile and lament, of hubris and judgment. The city may be gone, but the word itself carries centuries of meaning, heavier than stone. This is the true immortality of Babylon. Its kings are dust. Its walls are broken. Its gardens may never have existed. But the idea endures. The idea has outlasted empires, religions, even languages. And perhaps, in the end, that is what Babylon always sought. When Nebuchadnezzar stamped his name on every brick, when priests raised hymns to Marduk, when the ziggurat rose tier by tier toward the heavens, they sought eternity. They did not find it in stone, for stone crumbles. They found it in memory. Now the Persians rule, but in time their empire too will fade. Others will rise, others will fall. Yet Babylon's name remains, whispered in temples, sung in psalms, written in Greek histories, painted in Renaissance canvases, shouted in sermons as a warning of pride, murmured in wonder as a vision of marvel. The city that fell in silence lives louder in memory than it ever did in life. The name of Babylon echoes across centuries, sometimes as marvel, sometimes as warning. Its walls once cast shadows across the Euphrates, its ziggurat once reached toward the heavens, its gardens, real or imagined, once promised paradise in the desert. Yet what remains today is silence. Dust. Fragments of brick stamped with Nebuchadnezzar's pride, scattered across fields where shepherds drive their flocks. The river still flows, but it glides past ruins, not walls. The city that once called itself eternal could not even keep its own stones standing. That is the lesson, isn't it? Power feels solid, like stone beneath the hand, like towers that touch the clouds. But power is air disguised as brick. It is breath disguised as eternity. It is fragile in ways its wielders rarely see. Babylon did not fall because its walls were weak, or its armies cowardly, or its gods absent. It fell because it believed itself immune to time. And time, patient as the river, always finds a way. Imagine the walls again, blazing with torches, thrumming with music, the pride of a city certain of its eternity. Now imagine standing there centuries later, the torches gone, the bricks crumbling beneath your feet, weeds sprouting where dancers once spun. Can you still hear the laughter? The chants of priests? The thrum of chariots on stone? Or do you hear only the wind, whispering across emptiness? That is the fragility of power. It dazzles in its moment, but its moment is always shorter than it believes. History is full of Babylons. Rome, Byzantium, the empires of China and the caliphates of Arabia, the kingdoms of Europe, the dynasties of the New World. Each thought itself the center of eternity. Each believed its walls unbreachable, its gods unshakable, its wealth inexhaustible. And each, in time, became dust. The pattern is relentless: rise, glory, arrogance, decline, fall. The cycle is older than writing. Babylon is not unique in this. It is only one voice in the endless chorus of fallen pride. But it is the voice that became a symbol, a shorthand for the truth that no power endures forever. Even Cyrus, who conquered the unconquerable, who bent the river to his will, would one day die. His empire, vast and glittering, would fracture and fade. Persia too would fall, as Babylon did. And Alexander, who later stood in Babylon and dreamed of making it his capital, would die in its halls, his empire splintering before it was even whole. Power is always temporary. Even in triumph, it carries the seed of its own end. The fragility of power lies not only in walls and armies, but in people. Pride blinds. Wealth dulls. Luxury softens. Arrogance silences the warnings of danger. Babylon was undone not by siege engines, but by its own complacency. It trusted its walls too much. It trusted its gods too blindly. It trusted its eternity too completely. And so when the river shifted, when silence crept beneath the gates, the city did not notice until it was too late. And yet, is that not what makes the story so human? Babylon's fall is not simply the tale of one city. It is a mirror held to us all. Who among us does not believe, in some corner of the heart, that our lives, our nations, our creations will endure? We build towers of steel and glass, we carve monuments in stone, we etch our names into history, hoping they will outlast us. But time is patient. The river flows on. Someday, our towers will crumble too. But fragility is not only tragedy. There is beauty in it as well. Because though the stones collapse, the memory endures. Though Babylon is ruins, its name lives. Though the city fell in silence, it roars in story. Fragility reminds us that nothing can last, and so everything we build, every life we live, shines all the brighter in its briefness. Power may fade, but meaning lingers. Close your eyes and imagine again the streets of Babylon. The drums beat, the torches blaze, the gardens bloom. The people laugh, confident in their eternity. Now open them to the silence of ruins, the reeds whispering in the wind. Between those two visions lies the whole arc of history, the rise, the pride, the fall, the memory. That arc is the legacy of every people, every empire, every dream. And so Babylon teaches us, even now. It teaches us to marvel at human ambition, at walls so wide chariots could race upon them, at gardens said to touch the heavens, at temples where gods seemed to walk. It teaches us to laugh gently at human pride, at kings who stamp their names on every brick as though eternity could be sealed with clay. It teaches us to reflect on fragility, on how quickly glory turns to dust. And it teaches us, perhaps most of all, that memory is the true eternity. The walls are gone. The gardens are gone. The kings are gone. But the story remains. We still speak Babylon's name. We still imagine its grandeur. We still whisper its downfall as warning and wonder. That is the immortality its kings sought but never understood. They looked for it in brick and stone. They found it, unknowingly, in story. The Euphrates still flows, as it did when Babylon rose, as it did when it fell, as it does now, winding past ruins half buried in dust. It whispers to anyone who listens, power is fragile. Eternity belongs not to kings, but to time. And so, as the night settles over our own world, as we look back across the centuries at that proud, fallen city, may Babylon's echo guide us. Marvel at what was built. Remember what was lost. And carry with you the gentle truth that even the mightiest walls cannot hold back time.